After my mom passed away, my world shrank into silence. Her presence had always filled the house with a calm, gentle warmth that words never had to explain. Suddenly, the quiet wasn't peaceful, it was unbearable. I came home a few days after the funeral, thinking Dad would need help with the little things, bills, groceries, just having someone around. What I didn't expect was what he said to me the next morning over tea. He was staring at the same kitchen wall he and Mom used to hang their anniversary photos on. His voice, steady but soft, broke through the silence. I want to find someone to talk to, maybe even love again. I blinked. I thought I'd misheard him. My dad, who held Mom's hand through every hospital visit, who kissed her forehead the night she passed away, was asking me to help him move on? I didn't answer right away. 100 thoughts scrambled through my mind. Was he forgetting her already? Was he lonely? Was this grief talking? He took a slow sip of his tea, eyes fixed on the steam rising from the cup. She'll always be part of me, he said, as if reading my thoughts. But I'm still alive, and some part of me wants to feel connected again. That hit harder than I expected, because deep down I understood. Loneliness isn't just being alone in a room. It's walking through memories without anyone to share them with. I nodded, slowly, still unsure how I really felt. But I knew enough to realize that grief doesn't make someone stop needing love. In fact, it might make us crave it more. Over the next few days, I watched him closely. He didn't rush anything. He still paused by her photo every morning. He still whispered good night into the air each night before bed. But he also smiled more when we talked. He asked me questions about my life again. Real questions, not just polite ones. For the first time in weeks, he made an effort to cook breakfast for both of us, like he used to when I was in high school. It was in one of those moments, him handing me burnt toast with an apologetic grin, that I realized his request wasn't about forgetting Mom. It was about surviving without her. So I said yes. Helping your father date is not something anyone prepares you for. I didn't know where to start. He didn't know where to start. We sat down one evening, and I offered to help him make a profile on a dating app. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with the buttons on his shirt. I don't want anything flashy, he said. Just honest. So I asked him to describe himself. Widower, 2 grown kids, loves gardening, jazz, and crossword puzzles, he said with a smile that made him look 10 years younger. I added a bit more. Loyal, kind, thoughtful, looking for meaningful connection, not games. He read it over and nodded. That sounds like me. It was such a simple sentence, but it meant everything. He sounded like himself again. As we uploaded a few photos, he paused on one from a few years ago, him and Mom standing by the lake. That one stays with me, he said quietly, setting it as his phone background. But maybe someone will want to hear the story behind it. That line stayed with me for days. It made me think of how little we really talk about the layers of love, how it can be deep and complex, how it can evolve without replacing what came before. That idea started to soften something in me. A few days later, he received his first message on the app. He didn't tell me right away. I only found out because he came into the kitchen, humming an old Sinatra song. I asked him why he was in such a good mood, and he just shrugged, but the sparkle in his eyes gave him away. Eventually, he told me about her, a woman named Eliza. She lost her husband 2 years ago. They bonded over gardening, poetry, and missing the same songs from the radio. I sat with that information for a while. Part of me still felt strange about it. Not angry, just unsure. But I watched him light up again. And I couldn't deny how that changed things. The surprising part, through helping him, I started thinking about love in my own life, or rather, the lack of it. I'd been so focused on work, responsibilities, and later, grief that I forgot what it felt like to be close to someone. Not just physically, but emotionally, to feel seen. My dad wasn't the only one who'd been walking through a fog. And in helping him find clarity, I realized I might be ready to step into the light again myself. But that's another part of the story. All I knew at that moment was this: sometimes love doesn't end, it changes form. And if you're brave enough, you can find it again. Even after goodbye, Dad was nervous before his first coffee meeting with Eliza. He asked if his shirt looked too formal, then too casual, and finally settled on the same one he wore to Mom's retirement party years ago. I didn't say anything, but I noticed when he left, there was a quiet buzz of excitement around him I hadn't seen in a long time. I stayed behind, unsure how to feel. It was strange, watching someone you've always known as half of a perfect pair try to find new rhythm with someone else. But I was also proud. He was trying. That same day, I found myself wandering into a small bookstore I used to visit in college. I wasn't looking for anything, just space. The place smelled like cedarwood and old paper, and the owner had changed. A new girl was at the counter, glasses slipping down her nose, completely lost in a novel. I asked her about a book my mom once loved, and she lit up, talking about how much that author meant to her too. Her name was Maya. There was nothing dramatic, no sparks, no intense music in the background, just a conversation. Comfortable. I walked out with a book I didn't plan to buy, and a thought I didn't expect to have. Maybe I wasn't as closed off as I thought. Over the next few weeks, Dad and Eliza started seeing each other regularly. They took long walks, sent each other funny articles, and exchanged stories about their spouses, not avoiding the past, but acknowledging it openly. It was honest, even refreshing. Eliza wasn't trying to be my mom. She didn't speak in her voice or cook her recipes, but she made Dad laugh. Really laugh. The kind that shakes his shoulders. That mattered. Meanwhile, I started dropping by the bookstore more often, sometimes to chat, sometimes just to be around Maya. Her presence was calm, thoughtful. We didn't talk about anything heavy, but she remembered small things I said, what kind of tea I liked, that I hated dog-eared pages, that I once failed a literature exam because I fell asleep reading the assigned novel. She laughed, not mockingly, but kindly. It felt good. Normal. I didn't realize how much I missed normal. One evening, Dad asked if he could bring Eliza over for dinner. I agreed, but something in me tensed. I wasn't sure if it was loyalty to Mom or fear of change. When they arrived, I saw Dad differently, not as a grieving husband, but as a man rediscovering parts of himself. Eliza was graceful. She didn't try too hard. She complimented Mom's photo on the shelf and asked about her favorite flowers. I caught Dad watching me, probably worried about how I was taking it all in. But I smiled, not forced, genuine, because I realized that night that he wasn't replacing anyone. He was opening a new chapter in a story that hadn't ended. A few days later, I bumped into Maya at the grocery store. We both reached for the same brand of mint tea and laughed. She asked if I wanted to join her for coffee sometime, and I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't a big deal, but to me, it was something. The quiet step forward I didn't know I was ready to take. Coffee turned into a walk, and a walk turned into long conversations about everything and nothing. We talked about books, family, losing people, and not knowing how to start again. She told me about her mom, who'd passed 3 years ago, and how grief doesn't get smaller, it just stretches around your life. That line stayed with me. I told her about my dad and how brave I thought he was for letting someone in again. She said, maybe it's not bravery. Maybe it's just knowing you're still worth loving. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so much time thinking love had to look a certain way, grand, perfect, uninterrupted. But watching Dad and Eliza and being around Maya, I started to understand love can be quiet, uncomplicated. It can grow in the middle of grief without taking anything away from what came before. Dad asked me one day, out of nowhere, "You seeing someone?" I smirked. "Maybe." He nodded. "She makes you smile. That's enough." And he was right. I didn't know where things with Maya were going. We weren't rushing. But I liked the way she looked at the world. I liked the way she listened. I liked the way being around her didn't feel like work. As my dad and I walked together one evening, he told me something that stuck. I used to think I only had one great love in me. But I think your mom would have wanted me to find joy again. She knew how much I hated silence. That line undid me, because deep down, I knew Mom would have felt the same about me. She would have wanted me to laugh again, to love again. She would have hated watching me carry around guilt like some badge of honor. Love doesn't erase love. It expands it. That's what I was learning. And while neither Dad nor I were trying to replace what we'd lost, we were both slowly learning that letting someone in doesn't mean letting someone go. It just means there's still life to be lived. And maybe, just maybe, someone to share it with. Maya and I never had a defining moment. There wasn't a first kiss that shifted the universe or a sudden declaration of love. What we had was a slow build, conversations that left me thinking, silences that felt comfortable, and the kind of connection that grew when no one was trying too hard. It was simple, but it mattered. Still, something in me held back. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid of caring too much. I hadn't told her about everything yet. Not about the night Mom passed away. Not about the guilt I still carried for not being there in her final hour. I didn't know how to bring it up, and I didn't want to bring that heaviness into something that felt light. But the more I stayed silent, the more I felt like I was building a wall between us. Around the same time, Dad sat me down. He said Eliza had invited him to meet her children. He was nervous. "What if they think I'm trying to replace their father?" he asked. I reminded him of something he'd told me once. Love adds, it doesn't subtract. He smiled, but I could see the worry behind his eyes. It was hard for him, just like it was hard for me. Even when you're ready to move forward, part of you still looks back. A week later, Maya invited me to a poetry reading. It wasn't really my thing, but I went because she asked. One of the poets read a piece about grief and moving on, and a line hit me hard. "We don't stop loving the dead. We just stop expecting them to walk through the door." I didn't hear the next few lines. That one settled into my chest like a weight I'd been pretending wasn't there. After the event, Maya noticed I was quiet. She didn't press. She just said, "You don't have to tell me anything. But if you do, I'll listen." That night, I told her everything. About Mom. About the silence in the house. About Dad asking for my help. About the guilt. About the confusion. And about how I didn't know what to do with the feelings I was starting to have for her. She didn't respond with some perfect line. She just took my hand and said, "That all sounds heavy, but I'm still here." That was it. But that was everything. Meanwhile, Dad went to meet Eliza's kids. When he came back, he looked lighter. "It wasn't easy," he said, "but it was honest. And that's all we can be." He told me Eliza's daughter had asked him if he still loved Mom. "Of course I do," he told her. "And that's why I know what love should feel like." That's how I recognized it again. That stayed with me, because for the first time, I saw love not as a chapter that ends, but as something that changes form. It doesn't disappear. It grows, stretches, finds new spaces to live in. And I started to believe it could live in me again. I visited Mom's favorite garden the next day. It wasn't about closure. I wasn't looking for signs or answers. I just wanted to be somewhere that reminded me of her. There, on a bench, I found something unexpected, an old envelope slipped into a crack between the wood planks. It had my name on it. It was a letter she'd written months before she passed, but never gave me. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Inside, she wrote about how proud she was, how she knew I'd feel lost without her, and how that was okay. She told me not to shut people out, that life would keep going, and I should let it. Her last line was simple: "Don't feel guilty for smiling again." I read it 3 times. That last line unlocked something in me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been waiting for her permission, even after she was gone. Maybe I needed to hear it in her words to really believe it. That weekend, Maya and I went for a long walk. I didn't say much at first, but when we stopped by a small lake, I looked at her and said, "I think I'm finally ready to stop looking back so much." She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need words. I didn't need to explain. With Dad, things also shifted. He started planning a trip with Eliza. Nothing extravagant, just a weekend getaway to a place he and Mom had once talked about visiting. She would have wanted me to go, he said. I never had the chance with her, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't go at all. It struck me how much we hold back in the name of respect for the past, forgetting that honoring someone's memory doesn't mean living in a shadow. It means living in a way that reflects what they taught us. And Mom taught us to keep going, to love fully, to be kind, even when we're broken. Maya wasn't replacing anyone. She wasn't trying to, but she brought something into my life I didn't realize I'd been missing: peace. Not excitement or drama, just the quiet kind of peace that makes you feel safe again. Dad and I talked about it one evening. We didn't make it a big deal. He just said, "It's nice to have someone to talk to, isn't it?" And I nodded, because it was. That's what love started to mean to me, not perfection or intensity, just presence, just trying, just staying when things get real. And maybe that's all any of us need. Dad proposed to Eliza 6 months after they met. He didn't make a big announcement. He just told me one morning over breakfast. She said yes. He said, pouring coffee like it was any other day. I looked at him and saw something different, not a man replacing the past, but someone choosing to live the rest of his life fully. I nodded, not because I wasn't surprised, but because I knew it made sense. He'd found someone who saw him for who he was, grief and all, and loved him anyway. I told Maya that evening. Her eyes lit up. "That's beautiful," she said. "You're okay with it?" I thought for a second, then said, "Yeah, more than okay." And I meant it. It wasn't just about him. It was about me, too. About realizing that life doesn't wait for us to be fully healed. Sometimes it meets us in the middle of the healing and keeps going. Dad asked if I'd be there when they exchanged vows. It was a small ceremony, just close family. No elaborate speeches, just simple promises. I stood quietly to the side, watching a man who once thought his love story had ended start a new one, not out of loneliness, but from a place of peace. And watching him reminded me of how far we'd both come. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside and said, "Your mom would have liked her, not because she's the same, but because she's kind, and she loves without trying to erase the past." I believed him, and I think in some quiet corner of the world, Mom would have smiled. Maya and I kept things steady. No pressure, no rush. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized how rare it was to feel so understood. She didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. Through quiet days, through awkward moments, through stories I hadn't shared with anyone else. She made space for all of it. One evening, we sat outside, watching the sky shift colors. She turned to me and said, "Do you ever wonder what she'd think of me?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. I looked at her and said, "I think she'd thank you for being here." Because I knew Mom wouldn't want me stuck in the past. She'd want me laughing again, trusting, living. I started to see love differently, not as a story with one perfect beginning and end, but as something that evolves, something that makes room for both memory and hope, something that's not threatened by what came before, but strengthened by it. Maya didn't fill a void. She stood beside it, with me, without flinching. Dad and I grew closer in this new chapter. We talked more openly than we ever had, not just about grief, but about the future, about the kind of people we were becoming. He once told me, love isn't about erasing pain. It's about building something that can hold it. That stayed with me, because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the hard parts. I understood that real connection isn't about perfection. It's about presence, showing up, especially when it's not easy. Maya met the rest of the family slowly. No pressure. Everyone welcomed her, not because they were trying to move on, but because they saw how she fit, without forcing it. She didn't try to be part of the story. She just listened to it, and over time became part of it naturally. One day, I asked her if she ever worried we were just two people clinging to each other after loss. She smiled and said, "Maybe that's how it started, but that's not where it ends." And she was right. What began in the shadow of grief had turned into something strong. Not flashy, not dramatic, just real. We didn't talk about the future in big terms. No grand plans or timelines. But we shared routines, weekend breakfasts, long walks, favorite books passed back and forth. And slowly, that became something more meaningful than any big gesture. It became life. There was a moment, quiet, ordinary, when I realized I loved her. It wasn't sparked by anything big, just her laughing at a terrible joke I made, her hand brushing mine, the way she looked at me without expecting anything. It felt simple, natural, like something that had been growing all along. Dad and Eliza moved into a new house together. He gave me a key. "For when you visit," he said, "and when you need somewhere to just be." I thanked him, not just for the key, but for showing me that love at any stage in life is still possible, still worth choosing. I thought about everything that had changed, about how, after Mom passed, I thought life had closed in on itself, but instead it had opened, slowly, quietly, with people who didn't try to replace what was lost, but who helped carry it forward. Sometimes love shows up again in ways we don't expect. It doesn't come to erase. It comes to remind us we're still here, still capable, still worthy. After my mom passed away, my dad asked for something that shocked me. He asked me to believe in love again. And somehow we both did. Not because we were ready, but because life doesn't wait. It just keeps offering us moments. And every once in a while, if we're willing, we take one and begin again.